Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin, and in today's QuiltCon 2024 video, we're going to show you some of the highlights of the handwork category. And oh my goodness, there's a lot to say about it. So we're in the handiwork category, and this is Most Noble Sorceress by MELANIE TUAZON, T-U-A-Z-O-N. And what you see, or what I see, is just a really interesting exploration of hand quilting. There's a lot that's tied with very fine threads, and then there's also hand quilting in this kind of almost like a fingerprint. Actually, that looks like a fingerprint to me. And so it's this focal, light-colored point with these corner triangles in a mustard color with the really bright, vibrant pinks and oranges around it. She says the title, Most Noble Sorceress, is a title for a quilter who makes soft portals to imagined realms. It's how Glinda addresses Dorothy when she first arrives in Oz. And so you can completely see the portal with the what I call a fingerprint, but it's this spiral quilting, hand quilting, and then tied around the edges and also in the very center. So just a really interesting and compelling work by MELANIE. Okay, so, ooh. So the title is Walking After Midnight, and I mean, you can just absolutely see how perfectly titled that is. On this side, we've got half rectangle triangles with little stars that are embroidered almost like cross stitches, but very organic with the moon. And the hand quilting on the moon side is very reminiscent of the moon, honestly. So there's some round, there's some curve, there's some straight, and then I'm going to use the word juxtaposed a lot because it's really the perfect word. On the other side is the sun in the sky with the mirrored half rectangle triangles of the sky blue and white with the sun. And the sun quilting is this hand stitched in concentric circles, and so it very much is reflective of the sun radiating out. So the moon has moon quilting and the sun has sun quilting with the rays coming out versus the stars at midnight. She says it's intended to bring both day and night into one quilt, and she nailed it. So this is Rails 2 by Michelle Wilkie from here in North Carolina. And when I read the placard, what I discovered is that she talks about how she and her husband lived in Mannheim, Germany. And they traveled through the Neuostheim railway junction. She said she thought about the number of trains and people who have traveled through, the history. And so she did a combination of machine and hand quilting. And you can see that in the neutral portions where the machine quilting was versus the cross stitch threads matched with the color of the piecing for the railways. It is really like looking at a map, and I think that is so original and such a wonderful contribution to this category. In handwork, this is Beginnings to See by Jennifer BROEMEL. And honestly, I want to touch this quilt so bad I can't stand it. It has really interesting handwork where she did these, it is a satin stitch, in all these really, really bright neon colors. Each individual little block has a different pairing of neon, and so like neon and orange, or burnt orange and bright pink in different orientations. So there's a plus, there's a right angle, there's one's running like an L. There are ones running right through the center like a T. And the overall feel is so Interesting. I'm almost looking for like, is there a pattern of letters here? But it is just, I want to reach up and just like feel it because it looks like it would have this matte-like texture, which I'm always drawn to those sorts of quilts. Ooh. Okay, so I looked at it and went, ooh, and then I read the placard, of course, and then I looked back at it and went, ooh. So this is Shine on Me by Julie Reuben, and as I'm reading what I was discovering, she said it took its time telling me what it wanted to be, resulting in several false starts. She took some out, she ripped it apart, then she had to go back and add. I did that myself with my quilt. And then she said she spontaneously decided to quilt freehand spirals rather than the wavy lines that she had planned. Gradually, the yellow arc felt like a band of sunshine. And then I knew that the background spirals should be different shades of floral tones. Once this image became fixed in my mind, selecting the thread colors brought me so much joy. In this bottom, that bottom arc, you can see the floral colors, the purples and plums and pinks and oranges, and then this shine of the bright, vibrant yellow spirals. And then in the background, the same floral colors on the dark green. And so what it feels like to me, it almost has its own sky with almost like fireworks. So it's like what's close and far, and the bright sunshine shine on me just coming right through. It is, whew, it just makes me happy in my heart. All right, so this is Sewing Circle by JENSEN, and you may not see it at first blush. I didn't, maybe you already have, but it is a enlarged log cabin block. And in the center of the hearth, which is that red square that's so classic log cabin, there are thimbles that have been hand stitched onto it. And the artist in her statement comments that she feels connected to the ancestry of quilting. And so the women who would gather in a circle, which is reflected in the quilting, and get together and quilt together throughout so much time, so much of our history. And so she says this connection is deeply meaningful to me. The circular element represents power, support, companionship, and artistic exploration generated by coming together for the sewing circle. This is Borrowed Blue by Jennifer BROEMEL. We've seen another one of her quilts already with the satin stitch in bars. This is a exploration to me of different stitch colors in the cross stitch fashion. It appears what she did was hand stitch on the X and Y axis and then come back and put the little cross stitch X's all through. And because of her color choices of thread, it changes the way the fabric behind it looks. So it really is just the choice of thread color. If you ever wondered if thread color matters, it matters, and it really can change the look of the fabric. And I think it's perfectly shown here with Jennifer's Borrowed Blue. This is Summer Loven by REBEKA LAMBERT in the handwork category. This is the third place winner. And she says that it embodies the sweetness of summer. She said, when I look at this quilt, I'm reminded of all the things my family was involved in during the summer I made it, including late nights and long days. It looks like a quilt that you want to roll up in on your couch. And that may be the best compliment that we could give. It looks soft and approachable and happy and summery. This is Ghana Batik Study by Lauren Klementz-Harte, and this is the second place winner in the handwork category. And this fabric was a gift to her that a family member brought back from a trip to Ghana, and she had been holding on to it, waiting for the perfect project. She continued to experiment with shapes and spaces as the design evolved. So she said, the wonderful flow of the fabric's pattern seems to enhance the motion in this composition. And if you look closely at the quilting, you can see there's not only the quilting with dark blue thread through the batik fabric, but there's also quilting through the white sections, and in them there is some fairly dense embroidery of shapes. So there's the 3 bars, and then there's like a diamond shape that is just beautiful and stitched in, that gives it so much depth and movement. And it really does seem to go with the movement of the Ghanaian batik that was inspired the quilt. Okay, so this is called Coral Quilt, Stitched and Tied by Amanda NADIG. NADIG? I probably am butchering that. The first statement in her artist statement is that she said if she was going to try tying a quilt, she was going to be over the top about it. And I love that so much. So there's the tied portions, there's the hand quilting portions behind it, so it's not exclusively tied. And when I take a moment to look up close, there's a circular piece that's in the center. Her piecing is actually really interesting. It's not just a flat color. There's a whole group of neutrals in beige and ecru and tan and just a pale green, and the way the ties have come together, it really calls attention to just all of the various techniques that are in this quilt. And this was the first place winner. Okay, so this is Why Not? KNOT, number 2. You know, we quilters love a good pun, by Simone Simons from Perup, Northern Territory, Australia. And she said it was created as an experiment in maximalism and a modern approach to a hand-tied quilt. So there are 12,800 ties and 25,600 knots. She basically made a checkerboard quilt, but with the ties and the knots. I love the creativity there. Love the creativity there. In the handwork category, this is Return to Me by Robert BOSSCHER. He says that it started as play, choosing fabrics in his favorite color and enjoying the process of hand piecing. So he did hand piecing in this work and also hand quilting. And he said he began to explore a more intuitive type of quilting, letting each stitch determine the next. Oh, I love that. But then it sat untouched as I struggled with a long mental health concern. I lost my desire to engage in any kind of play in my quilting. I forgot about enjoying the process, the joy of transforming a thought or idea into a physical object, the celebration of making. Upon returning to this quilt after multiple years, I feel as if I've returned to a place of enjoyment in my making, a place where I recognize the joy I had in sewing these fabrics together. Okay, so I'm a fan of clothes in quilts, if you didn't already know. So 100% love this already. It's called In the Loop, belt loops, and it's by ELIU HERNANDEZ from Colorado. He said you might hear the pops and scratches of the harvested thread as it weaves its way through the coarse denim. So it's all these jeans that he has taken apart where the belt loops were or are and stitched down. Reclaimed denim belt loops, harvested, opened, and pressed. So it's, oh, y'all, the actual belt loops. Okay, I'm gonna point, but I'm not gonna touch this quilt. So the belt loop is open, so he took the belt loop apart and opened it and then stitched it in. So the belt loops are reclaimed, not just the denim, but also just the belt loop itself. Second-hand thread for the hand-stitched edging, new thread for piecing and seaming, and just the subtlest hand quilting through the whole piece. Oh, I love this. So, linen. This quilt is linen. So, you had me at linen. It is called UTurn by Debbie Shives, or maybe Shives. And you can see immediately why it's called UTurn. She said, I wanted to hand applique some of the wonderful Essex linen in my stash. Found this pattern, and with a couple of changes, it was perfect. So she machine quilted the first wavy lines on her long arm and then hand quilted the lines that echoed it with wool threads. I love it. That's really interesting and neat. So I really feel like this one could be both in handwork, which is where it is, and minimalism. It is called Because She's a Star by Barbie Mitchell. There's just some really interesting, subtle details in this quilt. There's variegated thread. There's some piecing that is just very subtle and interesting, but it's very minimalistic. It's one of those that seeing it up close, there's so much more appreciation there than from a distance. Okay, so this is Peoria Street Surplus in the handwork category by Laura Hartrich. And she said, sometimes we can't explain the things we do for our art, and this is one of those instances. So she made it and had it long-armed. And then she ended up deciding she did not like the machine quilting and pulled out all of the stitches and then went back and hand-stitched over the lines of where it had been. She said she questioned her sanity, but now that it's done, she's happy with it. The actual piecing looks like a Baptist fan to me. And interestingly enough, there is not Baptist fan style quilting in it. So that's kind of cool.